If you're watching this right now, I need you to stop scrolling, because the story you're about to hear almost ended with my death. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and 2 years ago, I woke up in a hospital bed knowing one terrifying truth. The man holding my hand was the same man who almost killed me. I remember the smell first, disinfectant and blood, then the sound of machines beeping, then the pain. My chest felt crushed. My head was pounding. Every breath burned like glass inside my ribs. I tried to move. I couldn't. And when I finally forced my eyes open, the first face I saw wasn't a doctor. It was my husband's. He was standing beside me, tears in his eyes, gently stroking my hair, playing the role of a loving, devastated husband. But I knew the truth. Just hours earlier, that same man had slammed me into the kitchen floor until the world went black. And now, he was smiling softly at the nurses and lying through his teeth. She fell down the stairs, he kept saying. I wasn't home. I found her unconscious. He repeated it so perfectly, so calmly, that for a moment, I wondered if they would believe him. And that thought terrified me more than the pain, because if they believed him, they would send me back home with him, and I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach twist, I would not survive another night. As I lay there pretending to be confused, pretending not to remember, I could feel his fingers tighten around mine. Not love, a warning. Don't speak, don't look, don't ruin this. Every time a nurse walked past, my heart screamed for help. Every time a doctor asked a question, fear closed my throat. Because the truth was dangerous. Telling the truth meant consequences, but staying silent meant death. And then something happened. Something small, something quiet. A nurse pulled back the sheet covering my body and froze. Her face changed. And in that moment, I realized the lie my husband had practiced so carefully was beginning to fall apart. Before I tell you what she saw and what the doctor said next that saved my life, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Because for years, I believed no one would ever listen to me, and if you're here right now, it means I was wrong. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because this didn't start in a hospital. It started with love, or at least, what I thought was love. Before the hospital, before the bruises, before the fear that lived permanently in my chest, there was a version of me that felt safe. My name is Emily Carter, and back then I was just a normal woman living a quiet, ordinary life in Seattle. I was 29 years old, a third-grade teacher at a public school near downtown. My days were filled with lesson plans, noisy classrooms, glitter-covered art projects, and kids who believed I could fix anything. I loved my job. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't pay much, but it gave me purpose. After school, I'd stop by the same small cafe near my apartment, order a latte, and grade papers while watching people walk past the window. Weekends were simple: grocery shopping, calling my parents, long walks when the weather allowed. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't searching desperately for love. I just believed that someday the right person would come along. And then, he did. I met Ryan 6 years ago at a friend's engagement party. I almost didn't go that night. I remember standing in front of my mirror, exhausted after a long week, telling myself I'd stay for an hour and then leave. But the moment I walked in, I noticed him. Not because he was loud or flashy, but because he was calm, comfortable, like he belonged everywhere without trying. He was standing near the window, talking to a small group of people, smiling easily. When our eyes met, he smiled at me. Not in a way that made my stomach flip, but in a way that made me feel seen. His voice was steady, warm. He asked what I did, and when I told him I was a teacher, his eyes lit up. "That's not an easy job," he said. That word stayed with me. Strength. We talked for hours. Not the shallow, forced small talk I was used to. Real conversations. Books. Childhood memories. Dreams we'd never said out loud. He listened. Not just waiting for his turn to speak. Actually listening. When the party ended, he didn't push. He didn't ask to come over. He didn't pressure me. The next morning I woke up to a text. "Good morning." And after that, there was always a message. Every morning, every night. He remembered details. my favorite coffee order, the author I loved but never finished reading, the fact that thunderstorms made me anxious. He brought me coffee before work, flowers for no reason, left handwritten notes in my bag. My friends adored him. They told me how lucky I was. And I believed him. We dated for 2 years. 2 good years. Or at least, 2 years that looked good. Looking back now, I can see small things, little red flags, but at the time they didn't look red. They looked like love, concern, protection. He didn't like me staying out late. He said he worried about my safety. He wanted to know where I was all the time. He said it was because he cared. He didn't love my male coworkers. He said men only wanted one thing. And slowly, subtly, he became the center of my world. When he proposed, I cried. When I said yes, I meant it. We got married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family. White dress, soft music, laughter everywhere. When we said our vows, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, I had no idea how literal those words would become. For the first few months after the wedding, things felt normal, comfortable, like we were building a life together. Then, things began to change. 6 months in. That's when the mask slipped. The first time he got angry, it caught me completely off guard. It was over something small, dinner. I'd cooked after a long day at work and he said it was overcooked. His tone wasn't playful, it was cold, sharp. I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, and then his hand hit my face. The sound echoed through the kitchen. I stood there frozen, my cheek burning, my mind unable to process what had just happened. My husband had hit me. The man who promised my father he'd protect me. The man who told me I was strong. I remember thinking, this isn't real. But then he collapsed, he cried, he apologized. He said work stress had gotten to him. He said it would never happen again, and I believed him because I needed to believe him, because the alternative was terrifying. The next day, he brought flowers. He bought me jewelry. He took me out to dinner and held my hand like nothing had happened. And I covered the bruise with makeup and told myself it was a one-time mistake. But it wasn't. It happened again, and again. Each time the cycle was the same. Anger, violence, tears, promises. And each time it got worse. He started controlling where I went, who I talked to, how much money I spent. If I made plans with friends, he'd start a fight before I could leave. If I wanted to see my parents, he'd accuse me of choosing them over him. Eventually, I stopped trying. It was easier to stay home than deal with his rage. He isolated me slowly, methodically. He took control of our finances. He insisted on managing everything. He gave me grocery money and demanded receipts. If I spent even a little extra, he accused me of stealing. Then he made me quit my job. He said it was unnecessary, that he made enough, that my place was at home, and without my own income, without my own savings, I was trapped. The abuse became daily, not always loud, not always obvious. Sometimes it was a slap, sometimes it was a shove, sometimes it was words that cut deeper than any bruise. I started wearing long sleeves, even in summer. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror. I stopped recognizing the woman staring back. I tried to leave once, just once. And when he found me and dragged me back, I learned the most important lesson of all. Leaving isn't the most dangerous part. Trying to leave is. So I stopped dreaming. I stopped planning. I focused on surviving until the night I collapsed, the night I fainted, the night he took me to the hospital and tried to lie his way out of everything. By that point, I wasn't living anymore. I was existing. Every morning, I woke up with a tight knot in my stomach, already afraid of something that hadn't even happened yet. I learned to read his moods the moment he walked through the door. The sound of his footsteps told me everything. Fast and heavy meant danger. Slow and quiet meant I should stay invisible. I stopped asking questions. I stopped expressing opinions. I stopped disagreeing. Because disagreement had consequences. If dinner was late, he'd glare at me like I'd committed a crime. If I spoke too softly, he accused me of being disrespectful. If I spoke too loudly, he accused me of being aggressive. There was no right way to exist around him, only wrong ones. Some days the abuse wasn't physical at all, and somehow those days hurt just as much. He'd ignore me completely, refusing to speak, refusing to look at me, acting like I didn't exist. That silence was punishment. It made me desperate. It made me apologize for things I hadn't even done. I remember standing in the kitchen once, apologizing through tears, begging him to talk to me, while he scrolled on his phone like I wasn't even there. That's when I realized something terrifying. He didn't just want to hurt me, he wanted to control how I felt about myself. And he succeeded. I began to believe I was difficult, unlovable, a burden. I told myself that if I could just be better, quieter, calmer, more obedient, the violence would stop. But it never did. Instead, it escalated. He started hurting me where bruises wouldn't show, twisting my arms, pressing his knee into my back, squeezing my wrists until my fingers went numb. He'd whisper while doing it, his voice calm and steady. That sentence replayed in my head constantly. I stopped thinking about the future. No plans, no dreams. Just survival. I remember one night lying in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how my life would end. Not in a dramatic way, not with screaming or sirens, but slowly, quietly, disappearing piece by piece until there was nothing left of me. And that's the version of me who walked into that Thursday night. Exhausted, empty, terrified. I didn't know it yet, but my body had reached its limit. And when I finally collapsed, when I finally fainted, it wasn't weakness. It was my body screaming for help when my voice no longer could. By the time that Thursday night arrived, I was already running on empty. My body was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. My mind was exhausted from years of fear. And my heart had learned to stay quiet. I remember standing in the kitchen that evening, staring at the clock above the stove. 6:42 p.m. Ryan would be home soon. Thursdays were always unpredictable. Something about his weekly meetings made him come home tightly wound, impatient, dangerous. I learned that the hard way. So that night, I did everything exactly the way he liked. The steak was cooked medium rare. The mashed potatoes were smooth, no lumps. The green beans were lightly seasoned. His favorite beer sat cold on the table. I wasn't trying to impress him. I was trying to survive. When I heard his keys in the door, my stomach dropped. He walked in without saying a word. I smiled carefully, the way I'd trained myself to do. "Dinner's ready," I said softly. He didn't answer. He washed his hands, sat down, picked up his fork. The sound of metal scraping the plate felt deafening. He took one bite, then another, and then he stopped chewing. I saw it in his face before he spoke, the tightening jaw, the narrowing eyes. My chest tightened. I followed the same timing as always," I said, already knowing it wouldn't matter. He pushed the plate away so hard it rattled. My heart started racing. I felt lightheaded already. "I can make something else," I said quickly. That's when he stood up. When Ryan stood up like that, it was never to walk away. I took a step back instinctively. "You always ruin everything," he said, his voice low and controlled, the most dangerous version of him. Before I could move again, his hand wrapped around my throat. He slammed me into the refrigerator. The impact knocked the air out of me. My head hit metal. I saw white. I tried to breathe, but his grip tightened. He growled. He threw me to the floor, hard. The pain exploded through my back. Before I could crawl away, the kicking started, my ribs, my legs, my side. I curled into myself, arms over my head, begging him to stop. I don't even remember what I said. "Please, I'm sorry. I'll fix it." Nothing reached him. He was somewhere else, somewhere cold and empty. At one point, a kick landed squarely on my chest. I felt a sharp crack and screamed. Breathing became impossible. I tasted blood. Then he grabbed my hair and yanked my head up. My face met his fist. My nose shattered with a sound I'll never forget. Blood poured down my face, warm and thick. Another punch hit my temple. The room spun violently. I heard him shouting, but it sounded far away, like I was underwater. The edges of my vision went black. I remember thinking one clear thought, "This is it," and then nothing. No pain, no sound, just darkness. I don't know how long I was unconscious. Seconds? Minutes? When I came to, everything felt wrong. My body was moving, but not on its own. I opened one eye, the other was swollen shut. Streetlights flashed past the window. I was in the backseat of Ryan's car, lying down. My chest burned with every breath, my mouth tasted like metal. Ryan was driving fast, muttering to himself. "Wake up," he said sharply. "Come on." I tried to speak. Nothing came out. "Don't you dare die," he snapped. For half a second, something inside me softened. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was scared. Then he said the words that shattered that illusion completely. He said it calmly, practicing. She slipped, hit her head. He repeated it again and again, each time smoother than the last. That's when terror truly set in. Because I realized this wasn't about saving me. This was about protecting himself. I lay there, barely conscious, listening to him build the story that would explain away my broken body. And I knew something with chilling certainty. If everyone believed him, they would send me back home with him, and I would not survive another beating. The car stopped suddenly. Bright lights, voices, hands pulling me out, the emergency room, everything moved too fast. Ryan suddenly became the perfect husband, panicked, caring, loud. He shouted. They put me on a gurney. I felt hands checking my pulse, my blood pressure. Ryan stayed right by my side, too close. He held my hand gently, stroking my hair. It felt unreal. The same hands that had just broken me now pretending to comfort me. I opened my mouth. Ryan's fingers tightened around mine. A warning. I looked at his face, the soft smile, the pleading eyes. I knew that look. It meant, don't you dare. I don't remember, I whispered. Before the doctor could ask more, Ryan jumped in. She slipped, he said smoothly. Hardwood stairs. The doctor nodded, but a nurse nearby kept looking at me, really looking. She was older, with kind eyes that didn't miss details. I hesitated. Ryan leaned closer. You're safe now, baby, he said softly. I stayed silent. They started examining me, checking my ribs, my arms, my torso. Then the nurse lifted my shirt, and I felt the air change. Even through the pain and haze, I saw her face shift. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes flicked from my bruises to Ryan, then back to me. Because what she was seeing wasn't one injury. It was many, old ones, new ones, healing ones, a map of violence. Ryan didn't hesitate. She bruises easily, he laughed. The nurse didn't laugh. Neither did the doctor. They exchanged a look. And then the nurse said something that made my heart pound. We need to take her for scans. Ryan stiffened. I'm her husband. Hospital policy, she said firmly. For the first time, I saw anger flash openly across his face, but he controlled it quickly. Okay, he said through clenched teeth. The hallway lights blurred as tears slid down my temples. I felt trapped between two impossible choices: tell the truth and face what he'd do to me later, or stay silent and die slowly. The nurse stayed with me, and once we were out of sight, she leaned close. My breath hitched. I've been a nurse for 30 years, she continued. Tears poured from my eyes. I shook my head weakly. I can't, I whispered. She squeezed my hand. You're safe here, she said. Before I could answer, a technician entered to start the scans. As the machine hummed around me, my thoughts raced. If I told them, would they protect me? If I didn't, would I ever get another chance? When they brought me back to a room, it wasn't the same one. This one was private. Ryan was waiting. He rushed to my side, his mask back on. He asked. The nurse's voice was cold now. Ryan leaned in close to my ear. You fell down the stairs, he whispered. My entire body trembled. The door opened. The doctor walked in, holding a tablet. And the look on his face was different now. Serious, focused. He looked at me first, not Ryan, me. And I knew, deep in my chest, that whatever he was about to say, nothing would ever be the same again. The doctor didn't speak right away. He stood there for a moment, scanning the tablet in his hands, then slowly looked up. His eyes moved from my face to Ryan, and then back to me again. There was something different about his expression now. Not confusion, not doubt, certainty. Ryan's hand tightened around mine. I felt the pressure instantly. Not comfort, but control. The doctor continued, his voice calm but firm. I saw Ryan's jaw clench. The room went very quiet. I could hear my own breathing, shallow, uneven. Ryan spoke quickly, his voice forced into concern. She's always been clumsy, he said. The doctor didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned slightly closer to me. Ryan froze, completely. The color drained from his face so fast it was terrifying to watch. The doctor continued, now unmistakably direct. Ryan stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "She fell down the stairs." All eyes turned to me. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was it, the moment he'd warned me about. Ryan looked at me, his eyes burning into mine. "Say it. Say the story. Or else." For a split second, I almost did. Years of fear screamed inside me to stay quiet. But then I remembered the nurse's words. "You're safe here." I took a shaky breath, and for the first time in 3 years, I told the truth. "No," I whispered, then louder. "No." Ryan's face twisted instantly. The mask shattered. "She's confused," he barked. The doctor raised his hand. Ryan laughed sharply. He turned toward the door and spoke loudly. Ryan spun around. The door opened. 2 security guards stepped inside. Ryan backed away slowly, eyes locked on me. The look he gave me wasn't anger anymore, it was promise. "This isn't over." The door slammed shut, and just like that, he was gone. For the first time in years, I was alone in a room without him. My entire body collapsed inward. I started shaking uncontrollably. The nurse rushed to my side, holding my hand. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I sobbed, deep, painful sobs that shook my broken ribs. The doctor pulled up a chair and waited patiently. I stared at the wall. 3 years, I whispered. That answer changed everything. Within minutes, hospital protocol kicked in. A domestic violence advocate was called. Police were notified. My injuries were documented. Photos were taken, statements recorded. And as I lay there, exhausted, terrified, but strangely lighter, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again. Relief. Not because it was over, but because the truth was finally out. And no matter what happened next, I would never go back to that house again. The moment the door closed behind Ryan, the room felt different. Quieter, safer, but also terrifying in a way I wasn't prepared for. For 3 years, every breath I took had been measured around him, every word filtered, every movement calculated. And suddenly, he was gone. Not by choice, not because he allowed it, but because the truth had finally stepped between us. My body started shaking uncontrollably. Not delicate shaking, violent, full-body tremors that made my broken ribs scream in protest. The nurse immediately moved closer, one hand on my shoulder, the other gripping my hand firmly, grounding me. "You're safe," she said again. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But fear doesn't disappear just because danger leaves the room. Fear lingers. It sits in your muscles, in your bones, in your memory. I cried harder than I ever had before, not just for that night, but for every night before it, for every time I stayed silent, for every apology I whispered while bleeding, for every version of myself that slowly disappeared to keep him calm. The doctor pulled a chair beside my bed and waited patiently until my breathing slowed. He didn't rush me. He didn't interrupt. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but steady. I stared at the wall, afraid that if I looked at him, I'd break again. 3 years, I whispered. The words felt unreal in my mouth. 3 years. Saying it out loud made it real in a way it had never been before. The nurse inhaled sharply. The doctor nodded slowly like he already knew the answer. "Thank you for telling us," he said. That sentence hit me harder than anything else that night because for 3 years I had believed the opposite, that it was my fault, that if I was quieter, more careful, more loving, he wouldn't hurt me. But hearing a professional, someone trained to see truth through lies, say those words out loud, something inside me cracked open. Within minutes, the room filled with quiet, controlled urgency. Hospital protocol activated. A domestic violence advocate arrived. Her name was Laura. She introduced herself softly and pulled up a chair beside me, keeping her voice low, respectful. "I'm here to help you understand your options," she said. Options. I hadn't had options in years. Police were notified. Security confirmed Ryan had been escorted out of the building and detained for questioning. Every time someone said his name, my stomach twisted. Part of me expected him to burst back into the room at any second, to scream, to punish me for speaking. But he didn't. And slowly, Painfully slowly, my body began to realize something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. He couldn't touch me here. The doctor explained my injuries again, calmly, clinically: concussion, broken ribs, fractured nose, older fractures that never healed correctly. These injuries show a clear pattern, he said. Evidence. That word mattered. For so long, Ryan had convinced me I had no proof, that no one would believe me. But now, my body itself was telling the story. Photos were taken, medical records documented, times, dates, patterns. Everything he worked so hard to hide was now permanent ink on official documents. The question hit me like ice water. Home wasn't safe. Home was the most dangerous place in the world. I don't know, I admitted. She nodded, already prepared. We can arrange a confidential shelter. Shelter. The word carried shame and relief at the same time. I thought of everything Ryan had ever said about women who stayed in shelters. Weak, pathetic, failures. And then I thought about surviving, and survival won. Yes, I whispered. Laura smiled. Not happy, not celebratory, just steady. Brave. No one had called me brave in a long time. A police detective arrived shortly after, Detective Alvarez. She spoke clearly, respectfully, never once doubting my words. She explained that Ryan was being questioned, that based on my injuries and medical findings, there was probable cause for arrest. My heart pounded. Arrest. The word felt unreal. He told me no one would ever arrest him, I said quietly. Detective Alvarez looked me straight in the eyes. That was the first time anyone had said that about him. Wrong. Not powerful. Not untouchable. Just wrong. She asked if I wanted to give a formal statement. Fear flooded back instantly. My hands shook. Laura noticed and gently intervened. She's been through severe trauma. For the first time, people were protecting me. Not him, not his reputation. Me. I agreed to give a statement later, after rest and medical stabilization, and no one pushed me. That alone felt revolutionary. A few hours later, my parents arrived. I hadn't seen them properly in over a year. Ryan had always found reasons to cancel visits, start fights, or isolate me. When my mother walked into the room and saw me lying there, bruised, bandaged, barely holding myself together, she made a sound I will never forget, a sound that came from somewhere deep and broken. "Oh, my baby," she sobbed, rushing to my side. I tried to speak, but the tears came too fast. My father stood frozen at the foot of the bed. His face went pale, his hands clenched, and when he finally spoke, his voice was shaking with controlled rage. Those words hurt more than I expected, because I had trusted him too. My parents didn't ask why I stayed. They didn't ask how I let it happen. They didn't judge. They just held me. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone had my back. Later that night, Detective Alvarez returned. Ryan had been arrested in the hospital parking lot. He tried to leave, tried to avoid questioning. That added more charges. The detective explained it calmly, professionally. But all I heard was one thing. He couldn't come near me. An emergency protective order was issued immediately. If he contacted me in any way, call, text, message, he would be arrested again. Still, fear didn't disappear. Because abusers don't lose power all at once, they lose it piece by piece. And the most dangerous time is when they realize control is slipping. I was transferred to a different wing of the hospital for overnight observation. Security stationed nearby. Nurses checked on me constantly. But sleep didn't come easily. Every sound made me flinch. Every footstep outside the room made my heart race. I dreamed he was standing over me again. When I woke up screaming, a nurse was there instantly. "You're safe," she whispered. Those words became my anchor. The next morning, Laura returned with paperwork, options, resources, shelter placement, legal support, counseling, emergency funds. I felt overwhelmed, but also supported, something I hadn't felt in years. I signed paperwork with shaking hands. Each signature felt like cutting another invisible rope tying me to my old life. When it was time to leave the hospital, they didn't let me walk out alone. A discreet transport vehicle waited. No sirens, no attention, just safety. As the hospital doors closed behind me, I felt something unexpected. Grief. Grief for the life I thought I had, for the man I believed he was, for the years I would never get back. But underneath the grief, something else was growing. Anger. Not explosive anger, focused anger. The kind that says, "This ends now." The shelter was quiet, warm, nothing like the scary place I had imagined. The staff greeted me by name. They didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. They gave me a room, clean clothes, food, and privacy. That first night alone in a locked room without fear of someone bursting in. I cried myself to sleep, not from terror, from exhaustion, from relief, from finally being allowed to rest. Over the next few days, reality began to sink in. I was no longer hiding. I was no longer pretending. People knew. Professionals believed me. The legal process moved quickly. Charges were filed. Medical records became evidence. Witness statements were added. Ryan's carefully constructed image began to crack. Friends distanced themselves. His employer was notified. The narrative he controlled for years was no longer his to control. But even as the world began to hold him accountable, I struggled. Because freedom doesn't immediately feel free. It feels unfamiliar, scary. I questioned myself constantly. What if I exaggerated? What if it wasn't that bad? What if I destroyed his life unfairly? Laura explained something crucial to me during one of our long conversations. Abuse rewires your thinking, she said. Doubt is part of survival. Trust myself. That was harder than anything else. But slowly, with support, with counseling, with space to breathe, I began to see the truth clearly. What happened to me wasn't love, it wasn't stress, it wasn't a mistake, it was violence. And violence has consequences. One afternoon, while sitting in the shelter common room, I caught my reflection in a window. I barely recognized myself. But for the first time, I didn't look empty. I looked tired. I looked hurt. But I also looked alive. And that's when it hit me. The fainting spell that almost killed me was the moment my life began again. That first night at the shelter, I didn't sleep. Not because I was unsafe, but because my body didn't know how to exist without fear. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed the sound of his voice, the slam of doors, the footsteps coming closer. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to my own breathing, waiting for something bad to happen. It didn't. And that terrified me in a strange, unfamiliar way, because chaos had been my normal for so long. Peace felt suspicious. I finally drifted into a shallow sleep. I dreamed I was back in the kitchen, dinner on the table, the clock ticking. But this time, when I looked at the door, he didn't come in. The door stayed closed. I woke up crying, not from fear, from grief. Grief for the woman I used to be before love became something dangerous. Grief for the version of me who thought marriage meant safety. Grief for the years I spent shrinking myself just to survive. The next morning, a counselor named Rachel introduced herself. She had a soft voice and eyes that didn't rush me. "We'll go at your pace," she said. "You've been in survival mode for a long time." Survival mode. That explained so much. Why loud noises made me jump. Why I couldn't sit with my back to a door. Why my hands shook when someone raised their voice, even kindly. Rachel explained trauma in a way no one ever had before. "Your body learned that danger was constant," she said. Gone. Was it really gone? That question haunted me, because even with the protective order, even with him in custody, I felt like he still existed everywhere, in my thoughts, in my reflexes, in the way my heart raced when my phone buzzed. A few days later, Detective Alvarez came to the shelter to update me. Ryan had been formally charged. Multiple counts, domestic assault, aggravated battery, false imprisonment. Hearing the words out loud made my stomach flip. I'd spent years minimizing what he did. But the law called it what it was, crimes. "He's denying everything," the detective said gently. "But the medical evidence is strong." Part of me felt relief, another part felt guilt, because even after everything, I still remembered the man who brought me coffee, the man who smiled at my parents, the man I fell in love with. Abuse messes with your head like that. It leaves you mourning someone who never really existed. That afternoon, I sat alone in my room holding a paper cup of tea, staring at the wall. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I'd never allowed before. What do I want? Not what he wanted, not what would keep the peace, not what would avoid punishment, what I wanted. The answer didn't come right away, but the silence felt hopeful. Over the next week, pieces of my old life slowly began reconnecting. My parents visited often. My mother kept apologizing for not seeing the signs. I finally found the strength to tell her the truth. You couldn't have known, I said. My father didn't say much, but one day, as he was leaving, he stopped at the door. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. Surviving, not staying, not enduring, surviving. That word changed something inside me. I started attending group sessions at the shelter, listening to other women tell stories that sounded hauntingly familiar. Different details, same patterns: control, isolation, fear. For the first time, I realized something deeply important. I wasn't weak, I wasn't stupid, I wasn't alone. Abuse didn't happen because of who I was, it happened because of who he was. I stared at it for a long time, then I cried, then I wrote it again. The legal process moved forward slowly but steadily. Court dates were set, lawyers contacted, statements reviewed. Each step was exhausting, each step was terrifying. But each step also pushed me further away from the life I used to live. Rachel warned me about something important. Healing isn't linear, she said. She was right. Some mornings I woke up feeling hopeful. Other mornings I couldn't get out of bed. But even on the worst days, I wasn't being hurt. And that mattered more than anything. One night, as I lay in bed, I realized something profound. The fainting spell that brought me to the hospital. It wasn't my body giving up, it was my body refusing to endure anymore. It forced the truth into the light, it interrupted the cycle, it saved my life. For the first time since leaving him, I allowed myself to imagine a future, not a perfect one, not an easy one, but one where I could breathe, where I could make choices without fear, where love didn't hurt. And in that quiet moment, alone in a room where no one could harm me, I made myself a promise. I would never go back. No matter how hard healing became, no matter how scared I felt, no matter how long it took, the life I lost was gone. But the life ahead of me was finally mine. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't knock on the door and announce itself. It comes quietly, in fragments, in moments so small you almost miss them. In the weeks after I left the hospital and moved into the shelter, my life slowed down in a way I wasn't used to. For years, every day had been about surviving the next hour. Now, suddenly, there was space, silence, time, and that terrified me. Without fear constantly breathing down my neck, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. Some mornings, I woke up panicked, my heart racing, convinced I was late for something. Dinner, an argument, punishment. Other mornings, I woke up confused by the quiet, by the fact that no one was shouting my name. The shelter staff warned me this would happen. So I learned to take things slowly, very slowly. I focused on basic things first. Eating regular meals, sleeping with the lights off, sitting with my back to a wall without panicking. Some days, those small victories felt bigger than anything I'd ever accomplished before. I started therapy twice a week. My therapist helped me understand that what I experienced wasn't just abuse, it was coercive control, a system designed to strip someone of autonomy, confidence, and identity. That's why leaving feels impossible, she said, because it's not just about walking out a door. Reclaiming myself, that became my quiet goal. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward. Ryan's arrest wasn't the end. It was the beginning of accountability. Court dates were scheduled, charges were filed, protective orders renewed. Each letter from the prosecutor's office made my stomach twist. I was terrified of seeing him again, terrified of testifying, terrified he'd somehow find a way to hurt me even from behind bars. But every professional I worked with reminded me of something important. He didn't have power over me anymore. The first time I had to see him again was during a preliminary hearing. I almost backed out. I stood outside the courthouse shaking, my hands numb, my breath shallow. My mother squeezed my hand. "You don't have to be brave," she whispered. So I did. He was brought in wearing a suit, his hair neatly combed, his posture confident. For a moment, seeing him like that, controlled, calm, made my chest tighten. That was the man everyone else saw. But then he looked at me, and I saw it. Not confidence, not control. Fear. Real fear. Because he wasn't in charge anymore. I didn't look away. For the first time in my life, I held his gaze, and something inside me shifted. The trial came months later. Those months were some of the hardest of my life. Healing while preparing to relive trauma is brutal. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days I questioned everything, days I wondered if I was strong enough to go through with it. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the hospital, the nurse who believed me, the doctor who refused to accept a lie. The moment I finally said, "No, I didn't fall," those moments carried me forward. When the day of the trial arrived, I felt strangely calm, numb maybe, but also resolved. I took the stand and told the truth. Not dramatically, not angrily, just honestly. I spoke about the first slap, the apologies, the isolation, the fear, the night I fainted, the lie he tried to tell. I watched the jury listen, really listen. Some of them cried, others looked furious, and for the first time my story wasn't being questioned, it was being understood. His defense tried to discredit me. They asked why I didn't leave sooner, why I stayed, why I didn't report earlier, and I answered calmly with a steadiness I didn't know I had. "Because I was afraid," I said. "Because he controlled everything." Silence filled the courtroom. When the verdict was read, guilty on all major charges, I didn't cry, I just closed my eyes. Relief washed over me like a wave. Not happiness, relief. Justice didn't erase what happened, but it acknowledged it, and that mattered. He was sentenced to prison. A long sentence. Long enough for me to breathe. Long enough for me to rebuild. Long enough for me to finally believe that my life was my own again. After the trial, my healing truly began. I moved out of the shelter and into a small apartment of my own. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. Every choice in that space was mine. The color of the walls, the furniture, the pictures, the silence. At night, I slept without fear of footsteps, without bracing myself for anger, without rehearsing apologies in my head. I went back to teaching. Standing in front of a classroom again felt terrifying at first. But my students didn't see a survivor. They saw their teacher. And that helped me see myself differently too. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with. Some relationships healed easily, others didn't. But I learned something important. Healing doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was. It means you choose what moves forward with you. I also began volunteering at a domestic violence support center. At first, I just answered phones, listened. Later, I shared my story. And every time someone said, "I thought I was alone," my heart broke and healed at the same time, because I knew that feeling. And I knew how powerful it was to realize you weren't alone after all. 2 years have passed now. I still have scars, some visible, some not. I still have nightmares sometimes, still jump at sudden noises, still struggle with trust. But I also have joy, real joy, quiet joy, the kind that comes from safety, from choosing peace, from knowing my worth. I learned that strength doesn't look like never being hurt. It looks like surviving something that tried to destroy you, and still choosing to live. If you're watching this and you're in a relationship that feels like fear, if you're constantly walking on eggshells, if someone tells you they love you but makes you feel small, controlled, terrified by, please hear me. Love does not hurt like this. Love does not isolate you. Love does not make you afraid to speak. And if you're thinking, "I can't leave," I understand, I truly do. But I promise you this, there are people who will believe you. There are professionals trained to help you. There are safe ways out, even if you can't see them yet. The fainting spell that almost killed me saved my life. It forced the truth into the open. It ended the silence, and it gave me a future. If my story does anything, I hope it reminds you of one thing. You are not weak for staying, and you are not broken for being afraid. But you deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve a life where you don't have to survive every single day. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing survivors. And if you or someone you know needs help, please reach out to local domestic violence resources in your area. Help is real, hope is real, and life after abuse is possible. I am living proof. Healing didn't move in a straight line after that. Some days, I felt strong enough to believe the worst was behind me. Other days, I felt like I was right back in that house, waiting for the sound of keys in the door. Trauma has a way of pulling the past into the present without warning. There were moments when guilt crept in unexpectedly. Guilt for pressing charges. Guilt for being the one who spoke up when others stayed silent. My therapist helped me understand this too. Empathy doesn't disappear just because someone hurt you, she said. That sentence stayed with me, because I had spent so long confusing empathy with self-sacrifice. I believed loving someone meant protecting them, even at the cost of my own safety. Learning otherwise felt like learning a new language. I started setting boundaries, something that felt almost unnatural at first. Saying no without explaining, canceling plans without apologizing, choosing rest over obligation, small things. But each one rebuilt a piece of myself that had been taken. I learned how to sit in silence without filling it with fear, how to enjoy a quiet evening without bracing for conflict, how to trust my instincts again, the same instincts I'd been taught to ignore. One afternoon, while organizing paperwork for my new apartment, I found an old photo tucked inside a folder. It was from years ago, before everything changed. I was smiling, not a polite smile, a real one. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to exist without constant tension in my body. And then I realized something surprising. That version of me wasn't gone. She had survived. She was still here. Underneath the fear, underneath the scars, she was learning how to breathe again. As months passed, I slowly allowed myself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by what had been done to me. I traveled for the first time alone. Just a short trip. But it felt monumental. No one questioned where I was going. No one demanded updates. No one punished me for independence. I remember standing near the water one evening, watching the sun set and feeling something unfamiliar. Peace. Not the fragile kind, the solid kind. The kind that doesn't disappear when things get quiet. I also began speaking publicly, cautiously at first, sharing my story at small support groups, then community centers. Every time I told it, my voice shook a little less. And every time someone came up afterward and said, "I thought I was crazy until I heard you," I knew my pain had purpose. Not because suffering is necessary, but because survival can become guidance. There were setbacks too, triggers that came out of nowhere, unexpected waves of panic, moments where anger flared so hot it scared me. But now I had tools, breathing techniques, grounding exercises, people I could call. I wasn't handling it alone anymore. That made all the difference. Eventually, the court process ended completely. Appeals were denied. The chapter was closed. When I received the final paperwork confirming it was over, I didn't celebrate. I sat quietly and let myself feel the weight of closure. Not everything gets that. Not every survivor gets answers or justice or consequences. I knew how fortunate I was, and I carried that knowledge with humility. 2 years later, my life looks nothing like it did before. I live in a different city now. I changed my last name, not out of fear, but out of choice. A marker of a life reclaimed. I still go to therapy, still work on myself, still heal. Healing isn't something you finish, it's something you practice. But I wake up each day knowing one thing for certain: I am safe, and that changes everything. If you are watching this, and something in your chest feels tight, if parts of my story sound uncomfortably familiar, please know this: you are not imagining it. You are not overreacting, and you are not alone. Abuse thrives in silence, and the moment you tell the truth, even quietly, its power begins to fade. You don't have to be ready to leave today. You don't have to know every step. You just have to know this: your life matters more than someone else's control. The night I fainted was the night my body refused to carry the burden alone anymore. It forced the truth into the open. It broke the cycle, and it gave me the chance to live, not just survive, live. And if my story reaches even one person who needed to hear this, if it gives them the courage to question their fear, to ask for help, to believe they deserve more, then sharing it was worth it. Because no one deserves to suffer in silence. And freedom, even when it comes slowly, is worth everything. For a long time after everything ended, I thought healing meant forgetting the fear, forgetting the pain, forgetting him. But I've learned that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning how to live without letting the past control you anymore. There are still mornings when I wake up and my body tenses before my mind does, moments when a sudden noise makes my heart race, times when trust feels fragile. But there's something different now. I am not afraid of my own life anymore. I can sit in silence without waiting for it to break into violence. I can make plans without wondering who will punish me for them. I can breathe without permission. That may not sound dramatic to some people, but for someone who lived in fear every single day, it's everything. I've stopped asking myself why I stayed. I no longer replay every decision, wondering where I went wrong, because the truth is simple and painful, and freeing all at once. I stayed because I was surviving. And surviving is not weakness. Leaving didn't magically fix me. It didn't erase the trauma. It didn't turn me into some fearless version of myself overnight. But it gave me something I never had before, a chance. A chance to heal. A chance to choose. A chance to live without fear. And slowly, with time, with support, with patience, I started to feel like myself again. Not the person I was before, but someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate, someone who understands the value of peace. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels heavy, if parts of my story feel familiar in ways you don't like to admit, please hear me when I say this. You are not broken, you are not weak, and you are not imagining the danger. Love is not supposed to hurt like this. Love does not require silence. Love does not thrive on fear. Love does not punish you for existing. And if leaving feels impossible right now, that doesn't mean you'll be trapped forever. It means you need support, and support exists, even if you can't see it yet. The night I fainted wasn't just a medical emergency. It was my body saying what my voice couldn't anymore. Enough. That moment changed everything. It didn't just expose a lie, it exposed the truth. And that truth saved my life. Today I wake up in a place that feels safe. I make choices that belong to me. I laugh without checking the room. I sleep without fear of footsteps. And I remind myself every day that peace is not something you earn by suffering. It's something you deserve simply because you exist. If you know someone who might be living in fear, please don't look away. Ask questions. Create space. Believe them. Sometimes the smallest act of belief can become someone's turning point. And if you're the one who's hurting, please remember this. Your life matters. Your safety matters. Your story matters. There is a future beyond survival. And when you're ready, not rushed, not pressured, there will be people willing to help you take that first step. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing survivors. If this story moved you, please like this video so more people can find it. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories of survival, truth, and healing. And if you feel safe doing so, leave a comment, even just a heart, to remind someone out there that they are not alone. We survive together, we heal together, and silence does not win anymore. Thank you for watching. Your trust, your time, and your support truly mean everything. If this video brought you value, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel reach those who need it most. Stay focused, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next video.